justification was? Butch ghosted Kuro afterwards, cutting communication with no plans to pay him what he was owed. Butch even went an extra step and completely remade Imaginathan with a new animator and posted the new version publicly to his audience, much to the annoyance of Kuro. Seeing no other option, Kuro sued Butch Hartman to get compensated for his work in July of 2020. The hashtag #PayKuro took off on Twitter, painting Butch in a bad light, but not an undeserved one. The lawsuit was a success, and Kuro was awarded the compensation he was owed, but not without some final words with Butch and his wife, Julianne Hartman.
I was contacted by the Noog Network, not them specifically, obviously, Butch and Julianne, I mean, with a very phony message saying like, oh, Butch and Julianne want you to know, like, we really care about your career, and we're going to pay you the money that you deserve because we support you. And it's like, yeah, all this is nonsense, because if that was true, they would just say it themselves. So I just immediately responded straight up and said, why would Butch and Julianne not publicly apologize? If they really care for me, why aren't they talking to me? There's no way I'm going to publicly endorse them just because they're paying me. So yeah, they did pay me.
And that is true. There is no public apology to Kuro from the Hartmans that I could find. And a lot of the info around the case has been left unlisted, which is admittedly frustrating. Butch could screw over an indie animator, ghost them, throw out their work, replace him with someone else, and when he's called out for it by everyone, he responds as if he always cared for Kuro's well-being as an artist. Not very ethical behavior, Butch. Noog Network may have been a flop of a platform that got into legal trouble, but it completely was overshadowed by the Category 10 disaster that was Oaxis, which many people, including me, consider to be a scam.
I love entertainment, and I'm so excited to give you the opportunity to help me impact culture.
Now, for those who don't know, in June of 2018, Butch started a Kickstarter campaign for another family-friendly streaming service called Oaxis Entertainment. Noog was marketed as strictly kid stuff, with cartoons and flash games. But Oaxis' main selling point was everything Noog had to offer while also protecting you and your children from the likes of seeing sex, murder, and horror movie commercials. Because, it's not like Netflix has a specific children's category for family-friendly content already, right? If you go back to the original Kickstarter trailer, Oaxis would not only host Butch's original cartoons, but he was planning on bringing on other creators to make their own cartoons. He also said they would purchase licensing to have high-quality dramas, sitcoms, feature-length movies, animation, kids shows, sports, fitness, reality, news, video games, and much more. There was even a promise of a user upload feature, similar to YouTube, allowing people to upload their own content to the Oaxis service, all put through their very special Oaxis filter so that it would be deemed family-friendly. And Butch promised we could be a part of all this for the startup cost of $250,000. And the backer perks. Talk about being heaven sent. Phone wallpapers, a YouTube shoutout, $100 original artwork commissions, even an acting role on an Oaxis-produced show if the price is right. Thanks to Butch's built-in fanbase, the campaign was a rousing success, gaining nearly 1,300 backers to reach his goal. Even slightly exceeded it, in fact. It is only with hindsight that we can now say Oaxis seems like a complete snake oil scam. Butch even says,
setting up the company has been the biggest challenge in the last 3 years. Because Phil, you go to a company like Nickelodeon, there's already a Xerox machine there, there's already a water cooler there, there's already an HR department, but you got to set all that up when it comes to your company.
He's right. But when you stop and think about just what Butch wanted with Oaxis, it would be insanely expensive to implement, to an impossible degree without tens of millions in investment. For contrast, YouTube utilizes an algorithmic intelligence system in order to monitor all the stuff uploaded onto it because it's too expensive and impractical to implement human workers to sift through the mounds of content. YouTube's own system can't do its job 100% correct all the time, and that has been around for almost 2 decades at this point. So how was Butch going to afford implementing this content moderation system? What about licensing fees? Wouldn't the license fees alone cost more than the initial starting Kickstarter goal? How much of that startup cost will go towards financing that? Even as a concept, The budget Oaxis was setting was too low. Butch Hartman had his fans' support, but it would not have been enough to attract outside investors. Next, because it's brand new, it doesn't have the established marketable clout of Netflix, Amazon Prime, or the other multitude of streaming services that have cropped up. One of the ads for Oaxis shows the likes of Kim Possible or Spider-Verse being on Oaxis. Was Butch's plan to walk into Disney Plus's office and say, "Hello, I'm Butch Hartman, creator of Childhoods, and I have my startup rival streaming service that needs content. I'd like your stuff to stream on my stuff, and I won't be able to pay until I get subscribers."
Stop wasting my time, you corn-fed man-cow. Would you mind?
Yes, sir.
You would need a lot of capital to pull off this sort of business. You would need to either start smaller and grow like how Netflix went from streaming shows and movies to eventually creating original content, or be like Hulu and be owned by a multi-billion-dollar company like Disney, who can afford to bankroll a project like this. And even Disney isn't making money from its own streaming service. This leads to the biggest accusation of Oaxis. Was it fake? Butch talked about all these things he wanted to do with the service, but despite everything he listed above, he was not remotely crystal clear on how he wanted Oaxis to have Christian faith-based content as a key feature. Butch was very sneaky in keeping that under wraps, but soon after the campaign was launched, footage of Butch at a Christian conference was leaked, showing his true intentions for the service.
We're going to change culture. We're going to save families. We're going to speak to them in parables. Guys, I am not making TBN. This is not TBN. My stuff has got to be today. It's got to be hip. It's got to be cool. It's got to reach the secular people who we're trying to reach.
Butch knew exactly what he was doing with Oaxis. He's openly stated in multiple written and spoken interviews how religious content is overlooked and how he couldn't put his religious themes he wanted into his cartoons.
Like, I couldn't put scripture in my Nickelodeon cartoons. I couldn't have Timmy, Cosmo, and Wanda say scripture. They're not going to put that on the air. However, I could interject, like she said, ideas about Christian themes, family, friendship, love, that type of thing.
So while he paraded Oaxis as if his only goal was to make a family-friendly streaming service to protect your kids from the horror movie commercials, Butch opted to leave out necessary information from the backers. Because if Butch was honest,
God told me to start this new network that's just completely family-focused, entertainment that everybody can watch, and we're starting it now, and it is called Oaxis Entertainment. We're here to impact culture. That's what we're here to do. I thought it would be through Nickelodeon, but God told me it's going to be through this. That's what we're going to do.
He knew his audience would be less likely to support the Kickstarter if they knew it was religiously inclined. So rather than risking it failing, Butch got creative with the marketing. He was even caught saying,
Working in an industry, they only want to make money. That's all they want to do. And if you can be wise and use your gifts and talents and go amongst them and put your values in there and do it surreptitiously where they're not really noticing, sooner or later, they're going to notice something different about the place they're working.
Fun fact, surreptitiously means to do something stealthful or secretive, to go unnoticed. Once the Kickstarter was getting flack from its backers, it just went dead, with people getting the same dismissive stock response about needing to join a quarterly newsletter for updates. You even have backers requesting refunds in the comment sections of the campaign. But all fell on deaf ears, with many people resorting to social media to deal with their collective rage and frustration. If ever asked in an interview, Butch would dodge questions or give half-hearted non-answers to the actual nature of Oaxis, claiming that while faith would continue to be a part of his personal life, Oaxis would not be a faith-based service. But after the backlash he received from his blatant actions, he issued a written apology. Quote, "I am humbled by the kindness and love that Heart fans and friends have shown in the recent days. There are simply no words to express my thanks and gratitude. I'm sorry for any confusion that you may have felt in the last week. Thank you for your patience. All I ever wanted to do is entertain people with programming the entire family can enjoy. And, in keeping with that theme, that is what my most recent project is about. There have been others who think they've revealed another agenda. And honestly, I value and respect my fans and friends far too much to ever consider misleading you. I would never take the privilege of your trust lightly. Oaxis Entertainment is not faith-based. However, faith is part of me. I am the same guy I've been for the last 20 years. I'm not perfect and certainly don't claim to be. I'm excited for what's ahead moving forward with this project. Hopefully, it's something you'll really enjoy too. We can discuss all of this, the Twitterverse, YouTube, and more in the coming days. You are the best, and I'm genuinely thankful for each and every one of you." End quote. Wow, that is a non-apology if I ever heard one. At best, it's a loose, non-committal apology for everyone else feeling, misled. At worst, it's an exhausting humble brag about how he's only human and isn't perfect, but loves his fans and would never even think about misleading them, aside from, blatantly withholding necessary information from them about the subject matter being put onto the service they gave him money for.
Like a liar.
This was the tipping point for Butch's reputation, because even when Fairly Odd Parents was dragging in quality, the nonsense about Danny Phantom, his ego becoming more noticeable, the lawsuit around Nuke Network and Kuro, Butch was able to craft a friendly creative persona that fit his brand of family entertainment that he always strived for, but with his own power. He destroyed a great deal of the good faith his audience had, and the rose-tinted glasses were finally shattered.
I want to ask you a favor. I want you to go to this website. I want you to give me your email. We've been starting already. We're going around looking for funding right now. The only thing stopping me right now is the funding.
And not much.
That's not much. Exactly. Not much funding. The only thing stopping me is that. By the way, this is not me asking you guys for funding. I'm asking for your prayers.
Thanks to Oaxis, the internet united together with more evidence piling up of Butch Hartman's egomaniacal attitude beginning to surface. What once seemed like a one-off mistake now became a concentrated pattern of behavior. People began noticing his YouTube channel's blatant clickbaity titles and thumbnails, repetitive spamming topics for views, and an air of pompous arrogance that made Butch come off as insufferable. It didn't help that Hartman, through his channel, offered to his fans original art commissions for around $200. Okay, fine, that's what he charges, and the prices were clearly listed on his website. But fans who received pieces from him noticed that the quality of some of them were, ew. It became an entire meme in and of itself to compare Butch's work to the characters he was drawing and see just how much he butchered them. There was such a clear difference in quality from the Danny Phantom and Fairly Odd Parents style everyone grew up with, compared to these commissions Butch was making, and it left everyone baffled. You can even find videos from other YouTubers looking at what people received, then redoing their commissions for free, and in a style much more resembling the famed Hartman style. In the best case scenario, that can be explained by the character designs of Danny Phantom and Fairly Odd Parents being assumed to be representative of Hartman's work. However, those designs are Steven Silver's work, not Hartman's. Steven Silver is a prolific character designer, best known for his work on Kim Possible and Clerks the Animated Series, but also did many prop and character designs on Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom. So because of that skewed assumption of who did what, when you see Hartman's true art style, it can be very disappointing. You're hoping for a badass Danny Phantom commission, and what you get looks like Ember was done by a professional artist on the boardwalk, who would do it for a fraction of the cost and with way less of an ego. However, in the worst case scenario, some of these commissions were so bad, it was arguably because Butch may have taken major shortcuts in his commissions. In February 2021, Hartman was accused of plagiarism through his tracing of other people's artwork, like when he published his commissioned artwork of Attack on Titan's Mikasa Ackerman. The artist confirmed Butch did not receive permission to use their artwork as reference or anything. And oh boy, reference is definitely a stretch with how similar these two pictures are. And let's not forget about his Ranma piece. Tracing isn't unusual for an artist starting out or learning the proportions of a character they've never made before, but this is crossing the line. Especially considering they were paid $200 art commissions from a prominent cartoonist using his name as a selling point. Now, this isn't to say all of Hartman's artwork was traced. Many people have had art done by him and been pleasantly surprised. And in the case of his Ember commission, he's done multiple commissions of her where Ember doesn't look so bug-eyed. As an artist, Butch is competent enough, but he can't live up to the same standards he boasts about, relying on his name recognition to put out lesser quality work for a hefty price tag. But his lackluster art commissions aren't even close to the worst thing fans uncovered. Butch's more colorful opinions were starting to seep out. And that same O-Axis convention video, he blamed modern-day media from Netflix and similar services for the rise in mental illness and suicide, saying suicide wasn't even thought about back in the day.
Constant exposure to corrupt social media and entertainment is a primary contributor to this crisis. I know kids who have committed suicide. When I grew up, kids had a hard time, they got through it. Suicide was never even thought about. Where's that coming from? Anything can be changed. So I am uniquely qualified to bring about this change.
Mental health struggles have historically been severely underreported and weren't as commonly talked about as they are now. Communication about mental health struggles has gradually become more normalized over the years, with soldiers returning from war changing from being shell-shocked to having PTSD. The language has evolved, but the symptoms have always been there. So this isn't just insulting, it's out of touch and inaccurate. Butch is also on record unabashedly saying that introverted people are selfish.
Because it's all about you. You're self-centered. You don't want to get out of yourself and go like, well, maybe I could communicate with these people. You're making everybody else uncomfortable when you're an introvert like that, because no one knows what you're thinking, no one knows how you're feeling, and no one knows what to communicate with you.
It became a constant stream of uncomfortable revelations as clip after clip surfaced, showing Butch's unconcerned, callous disconnect towards mental health. And no one at the beginning knew where this was coming from. But the most egregious example was in Hartman's podcast, Speech Bubble, where in his interview with Tara Strong, the voice actor behind Timmy Turner, they were discussing Timmy's first voice actor, Mary Kay Bergman, her friendship with Tara Strong, and how she unfortunately passed by taking her own life. Now, most people would say this was an unfortunate loss, but Butch goes into another direction.
No, she had a very prolific career. She was awesome.
Doing great, and then she ended up passing away. And I think Tara actually had something to do with that, and so that's probably that was probably your fault. No, I'm kidding. That was probably your fault. That was probably your fault.
Making a joke at the expense of someone's suicide with a jab about Tara being behind it is disturbingly bad form. There's being disconnected from mental health issues, and then there's just not giving a damn about somebody because they're weaker for having a mental health crisis. All these factors paint a picture of a certain kind of person. They're all a key component of why Butch is the way that he is. Here we have a creator who, in his early days of his career, has such a fragile ego that he needs constant reassurance and validation. He was part of a wide variety of projects, but maybe that was not enough for him. He needed something to make himself feel grander, like his aspirations meant something, or that he could change something in an impactful way. Enter Butch's zealous faith in Christianity, a surprising discovery for the average Heart fan that leads to an interesting rabbit hole. Now, I've gotten into Christian media and creators in the past who have both good and bad aspects to how they incorporate their faith into their work. So I want to be clear that this section is not an indictment against Christianity. Rather, this is about how one person chose to use his religious beliefs as a justification for some morally dubious behavior, and my thoughts on it. Butch has told this story to a ton of different Christian outlets, but I will summarize it for you. One day, in the year 2000, Butch visited a friend at the Crenshaw Christian Center in LA. His friend had just received an award, and he was going to leave, but something compelled him to go back inside. When he did, Butch and his wife heard a sermon from Frederick K.C. Price that resonated so deeply with him, his heart was opened by its message. Quote, I ended up getting saved there. Julianne, my wife, got saved there. My mother got saved there at 62 years old. Our kids were raised there. I went from not wanting to go to church to being an usher standing in the building at 5:30 in the morning in a three-piece suit. End quote. This newfound faith invigorated Hartman and his wife, leading to them starting their own charitable foundation with their daughters, the Hartman House Foundation. Their mission was to support people in developing nations and in poverty-stricken communities in the U.S., building homes in Guatemala, feeding families in America, funding aid projects for orphanages in Uganda and Haiti, supplying scholarships, and running Pageant 360, an inner beauty pageant to empower young girls. Butch clearly became super passionate for his newfound faith. You can see small mentions of it sprinkled in random places if you pay attention, even verse dropping Luke 10:19 on his old Twitter account and Mark 11:24 on his new one. Now, is there a problem with being openly religious? Of course not. So, what's the problem? Well, maybe Butch can put it best.
Now, I don't do Christian shows, but I have Christian values in my shows. Why? Because I'm wise as a serpent and I'm harmless as a dove. Exactly.
Wise like the serpent and as harmless as a dove. It's an excerpt from Matthew 10:16, where Jesus gave guidance on how one should practice teaching his gospel amongst those that would do you harm. In the context of modern sensibilities, being wise like a serpent and harmless as a dove sounds more like being a deceitful snake masquerading as a nice person. It is a description of a con man, and that is ironic considering Butch's history, especially with Oaxis. This is one verse that Butch truly lives by, as it encapsulates how he approaches creating, how he approaches the hustling in Hollywood. He knows his religious ideas won't fly, so he sells cartoons he feels will be viable, but then proclaims that he's been sprinkling in Christian values to maintain his religious base. In an interview, Butch admitted Fairly Odd Parents isn't a Christian show, but that he attempted to inject Christian values of love and family into it. Kinda hard to see the connection here, since in Fairly Odd Parents, a majority of the time Timmy's being neglected or emotionally abused by his parents, which is why he got fairy godparents in the first place, and then treating Cosmo, Wanda, and literally anyone else who loves him like trash. Personally, I don't really see any Christian values in Fairly Odd Parents, despite what Butch may proclaim. And remember his thoughts on Danny Phantom's ghost?
It's a kid with powers. He has like ghost powers and he fights ghosts. Now, he doesn't fight like the ghosts of dead people because I'm a Christian guy. I'm not going to do that. And I get a lot of people asking me who are Christians, "You're a Christian. How can you do a show about a kid with ghost powers?" You know why I can do this show? He's the light coming into the darkness and he fights the bad guys. That's what he does.
This is Butch trying to have his cake and eat it too, to appease the Nickelodeon executives to greenlight the show, and then to retroactively repackage it so Christians don't think it's satanic with the use of ghost and the occult. As silly as those examples are, the real issues start when you see the other religious rhetoric Butch's ideals align with. Here's the first lines of an article where Butch was interviewed by Christian Post. Quote, "Parents trying to raise their children to be moral, upstanding citizens are being hurdled through a blender of wokeness, gender ideology, and immorality at an alarming rate. For the Christian parent, or any parent of moral decency for that matter, what can be done about it? Quite simply, it is imperative that we expose our children early to the foundational truths in the Bible." End quote. And Butch completely endorses this mentality. The fear-mongering hyperbole to protect you from what's corrupting our youth. It was everywhere in his Oaxis trailer.
It seems like today's shows are meant more to shock people than uplift and inspire them. I just recently met an 8-year-old who told me that they'd seen The Exorcist and loved it. The only way the 8-year-old could have loved it is if they'd already seen so much other dark stuff that they'd become immune to that sort of thing. Parents, aren't you tired of being constantly terrified that your child is going to see something that they shouldn't?
These are all calculated decisions for that goal in mind. But the moral grandstanding gets even worse when you also account for his wife, Julianne Hartman, and their collective thoughts on mental health. Julianne is behind Healing Journeys Today, an online teaching website and conference. Julianne claims she was able to beat her fibromyalgia diagnosis in 2008 through the power of Christ and her faith healer, Andrew Womack. With Butch's help, her program can alleviate a slew of illnesses: bipolar disorder, lupus, heart and kidney failure, multiple sclerosis, autism, and severe environmental illness. By the way, a severe environmental illness is their way of saying depression. In case it needs to be said, faith healing has no true merit in the world of medical science. But this mentality equates autism and depression as weaknesses and illnesses to overcome through your own will alongside God helping you. And yeah, that's just a fundamentally archaic, toxic, and unempathetic way to look at it. No wonder he has quotes belittling mental health and suicide all over his YouTube channel. He and his wife truly believe that it's something to overcome with faith. And if you can't, then that's your fault. Those kinds of beliefs are dangerous enough, but it's the moral superiority that pushes it over the edge. Mostly, I chalk this up to his successes at Nickelodeon, making Butch think he's immune from criticism.
Whenever you put yourself out there to do anything, there's always someone that's going to try and bring you down because they've never done anything on their own. So I look at people that critique as weak. Weak rhymes with critique. So if you're going to critique hey, this is never going to work or whatever, then I just say, you know what, let's see you try it, and then we'll see how you do.
For the record, there is no doubt that Butch and his family have done good things, building schools, donating food, and more. But when you look at their documentary for their foundation, Hartman House, the moral grandstanding becomes more blatant. Like when Julianne recounts Hartman House putting up a communications antenna in Uganda.
We saw a gentleman come to our church who told us that he needed an antenna in Uganda, in Kampala, to broadcast to everywhere in the villages and in the bush about why people were dying early in life. And basically it was AIDS.
Then there's Butch describing what it was like to help give that same radio antenna.
There are no words to adequately explain the impact that it had on me. Now, yes, did this gift have an impact on the community and the people that we gave it to, the radio antenna? Absolutely it did. But the impact it had on me, the impact it had on my wife, the impact I knew it would have on my children was beyond belief.
It just makes one wonder what their priority is. In their Thanksgiving turkey drives, Julianne proudly talks about not wearing gloves, so people accepting food don't feel like Hartman House don't want to touch them.
We serve them. We serve them not with gloves on, like we don't want to touch them. We serve them with our bare hands because they matter.
This is an odd observation, and also kind of gross, since food handlers should wear gloves because it's more sanitary, but okay. Hartman House feels like a noble goal done with tainted intentions, as despite all the good it has done, the tone of the Hartmans comes across like them doing it for the praise of their charitable actions. The pride-filled decisions to think only they can do this. Only the creator of your childhood and his faith-healing wife could help, which comes off less like genuine aid and more it's for the reward of gaining praise for your actions.
Butch and I looked at each other that day and said, oh, that's us.
So, Butch obviously is a very religious man that likes to Trojan horse his beliefs into his work. He's also a misleading streaming service salesman who moonlights with his own charity with his wife and family, where they do help people, but have very skewed views on their own charitable actions.
So when I'd go throughout schooling and, be super grateful for life when all these other kids around me would be really depressed and sad about really small things, I'd always get to go back to, wow, I guess I haven't gotten to see what I've gotten to see.
Is that it? Have we figured out the last bit of the why to Butch Hartman's fall? Does this all explain his heightened sense of ego and superiority? Well, we can't forget his connection to a somewhat cult-like fringe religious group. To be upfront about this connection, what we found is based off a call-out post drafted around the time of the Oaxis controversy, which details many connections between Butch, Oaxis, and the 7 Mountain Mandate, an evangelical practice where 7 different facets of society need to be controlled and influenced by their version of Christianity in order to create a perfect and godly world, with one of those facets being that of arts and entertainment.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
So, how is Butch connected to this organization? Well, the 7 Mountain Mandate, or the 7 Mountain Prophecy, is a proposed strategy for evangelizing the modern world and expanding Christ's kingdom. It gained a following in charismatic and Pentecostal churches, where those who follow it believe that the best way for the church to be effective is to bring change in the 7 major spheres of influence in society. education, religion, family, business, government/military, arts/entertainment, and media. They believe that in order for Christ to return to earth, the church must take control of all 7 major spheres of influence in society for the glory of Christ. Once the world has been made subject to the kingdom of God, Jesus will return and rule the world. So, how does this connect to Butch? Well, remember the video that entirely outed Oaxis as the faith-based streaming service it was always going to be? Turns out that was recorded at a Wealth Builders conference in Lone Tree, Colorado. That sure seems to be endorsing and marketing the benefits of the 7 Mountains Mandate and their impact on getting out of debt with God's plan. So, a religious conference mixed with timeshare boredom energy, and Butch was a guest there to discuss using Oaxis to secure one of said pillars. He references that throughout the full conference video that leaked.
But I got to hear him speak, and he was talking about the 7 mountains of influence. When he got to the mountain of entertainment, my heart just leapt out of my chest. And I turned to my wife and I said, "It's us."
That is the true context of the video. Not only was Oaxis meant to be a faith-based streaming service, but it was entirely a vehicle to, in Butch's own words,
"We're going to make a dent in this mountain of entertainment, I promise you. And the minute I put this up, people will flock to this."
And the conference wasn't a one-off moment. Butch and his wife were brought into the Truth and Liberty livecast, where the title of the episode would be Animator Butch Hartman, Teen Suicide, Depression, and Impacting Culture. Based on Butch and Julianne's last remarks on depression, this won't be pretty, especially not as the host of the podcast is Andrew Womack, and an infamous homophobic preacher, the preacher who got Julianne into faith healing, who also follows the 7 Mountains Mandate, owning a company by the name 7M Ventures Inc. and starting the podcast with,
"We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence."
Yikes. So Butch and Julianne are in like-minded company clearly. And the rest of the podcast details their news program with Oaxis, talking only positive news, insinuating that suicide rates are up high because of phones, insinuating Oaxis will lower suicide rates by affecting the mountain of arts and entertainment, then flat out just stating Oaxis might lower suicide rates.
You know, and then I believe those suicide rates might go down, and I believe those bad,
just the rate of depression
the
alone.
depression, exactly.
And Julianne ended with this nice quote.
Could you imagine living with that, of knowing that maybe someone killed themselves because they watched your show?
But all that is to say, the Hartmans were very ingrained within this religious circle. Butch and his family even went on Daystar, an evangelical Christian-based TV network, to sell Oaxis to other Christians, and said that God told him to make the streaming service and kickstart it.
God told me to start this new network that's just completely family-focused, entertainment that everybody can watch, and we're starting it now, and it is called Oaxis Entertainment. God told us to launch this Kickstarter. We're trying to raise $250,000 for our first phase of funding. We have $68,000 left to go.
Now, you would think if this was God's idea, that he would have donated a bit more to the cause. Well, don't worry. It seems like Butch and Julianne's religious connections helped the campaign with Oaxis as well, based off the majority of backers coming from Colorado Springs, aka right around the Wealth Builders Conference and Andrew Womack's ministries. But that's just speculation. However, objectively, Oaxis was a burning dumpster fire of lies way before it even launched. With that one campaign, Butch's true face was fully exposed. All the pride, ego, his true passion, and what he truly wanted to create.
Wouldn't it be awesome if you could be a part of something like this, to start a brand new, wonderful way to influence the culture? We're here to impact culture. That's what we're here to do. I thought it would be through Nickelodeon, but God told me it's going to be through this. That's what we're going to do.
By the end of this odyssey of bolstering and lies, do we really see Butch Hartman as a man that even wants to change his ways, let alone take criticism? An anonymous source contacted me who worked on Butch's YouTube channel during the peak of Oaxis controversy. Turns out that Butch wanted to control the narrative and tried to get his channel manager to copyright strike every video criticizing him. When he was told that this was a really bad move, and might I add, a flagrant abuse of the system, he left in a huff, demanding something be done. Now, I may be screaming into the void, but I think it's good to just reflect on what Butch really did wrong by also looping it back to his own mottos. Number 1, have no fear. Butch throughout his career has bolstered a can-do fearless attitude, literally saying on his YouTube channel that he has no fear.
Yes, you do. Everyone has fear. Let me put it another way. Fear comes for sure. The fear will show up, but it's your job to push the fear back. You have the power to accept fear or not accept fear. Why would you ever accept it? Why would you ever accept fear? Just because everybody around you accepts fear doesn't mean you have to do that. Don't you want to be an original?
But we know this isn't true. Like any profound narcissist, Butch does fear what he can't control, specifically the quality of his public reputation and how he's perceived by others, both of which were greatly impacted by his own actions. And I don't think he's mature enough to admit that he has weaknesses too, and that's okay. That there are things he does not fully understand, and that's okay too. We all make mistakes, but you're supposed to learn from them and grow as a person. So those fears turn into obstacles you overcame. But because he kept taking actions, feeling that he was the only one who could address a situation, that he always knew what was best, he alienated so many people because of the choices he made. 2, you have to believe in yourself and your work. That also means you have to respect other people's time, work, and effort. From your own crew on Fairly Odd Parents to Kuro. Bolstering your own effort while flagrantly disregarding theirs is just tacky. Especially when you also have to put out work that's traced. 3, don't ever stop and don't ever give up. If you stop, it's completely your fault. Just stop the motto at don't give up. Looking for fault in others is just a toxic mentality that boils down complex circumstances. To say, you seem really depressed and sad. Have you prayed enough? No? Then it's your fault you are like this. It's a rotten attitude that's not only toxic, but undermines the value of reevaluating your approach if something isn't working or getting outside perspectives from others who've had the same struggles you have. Most people want to help in a sincere way and don't have nefarious or negative intentions. And number 4, keep moving forward and be nice to people. Never be a prima donna because the person you're rude to today might be your boss tomorrow. Butch should have taken his own advice. Stop being fake, stop being a prima donna, and just be honest with yourself and what you truly want to do. Actually, in this case, he may have already taken that advice, as after everything, Butch put his all into his next animated project. One that would fully accept his religious roots and fully explore the Christian content that he's always wanted to make for so long.
In the garden, imagination flows where rainbows glow. There's cookie dough and happiness between your toes. In the garden, we want to grow with you.
The Garden. This one cartoon became a very big property for the Hartman family and became the culmination of everything he has worked on so far. The Garden is not only an app, but it has cartoons, songs, games, and more. This is Butch's current magnum opus, which follows the adventures of Lenny the Lion and Lucy the Lamb, 2 best friends that live in a magical place called the Garden, where anything can grow. The 2 serve God, who appears to them as a talking rainbow, and they refer to him by the authoritative title of the Boss. Episodes have the Boss, giving Lenny and Lucy daily tasks and challenges. And when the 2 struggle, they're